Welcome to the fifth Rome-Med dialogue promoted by ISPI and Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and sponsored by ENI. And a great thanks to His Excellency Josep Borrell, High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, for being with us today. Excellency, you were our confirmed keynote speaker also at the fourth edition of MED last December, but the delayed approval of the Commission made you on that occasion only a virtual potential keynote speaker. This time is the pandemic that forces us to this virtual format, but we are extremely honored to have you with us. The main focus of our dialogue will obviously be the MENA region, but let me start briefly from the global impact of the pandemic. You wrote that tomorrow's world is already here, meaning that the pandemic has acted as an accelerator of existing trends. Which acceleration will have the strongest impact on Europe, and will this make more urgent and feasible the need of a geopolitical Europe?
For sure. The new world was already there. It's already here. The pandemic has acted as an accelerator. The rivalry between China and US was there before, but it has been exacerbated. We can say that the COVID has been a great accelerator of existing trends, posing threats to the multilateral system, to human rights, to the rule of law. It will increase inequalities, it will increase poverty, it will increase fragility, it will increase divergences, fragmentation, and it will create political, social, and political turmoil. In the MENA region, the consequences would be more socioeconomic that related with the health. No? I don't want to dismiss the health consequences of the crisis, but the socioeconomic consequences will be bigger, because even in the more stable countries of the region, I'm afraid the crisis could spark unrest and instability.
We had Ghassam Salameh, the former UN envoy for Libya, with us in the same format 2 weeks ago. And he said, in the era of deregulation of force, you have to show sticks. Persuasion is not enough. It was, in a sense, echoing your words that Europe must learn the language of power. But can we? You have recently been to Greece, Cyprus, Malta, and Turkey. Are we up to the game of power with countries like Turkey and Russia?
Well, this sentence, to learn the language of power, will persuade me until the end of my mandate. Everybody will be remembering me. Look, what did you mean when you said the power? Power, for many people, power means military power. No? But Europe was being built against the same idea of power. We suffered so much of power that we wanted to abolish power relations and to go to another kind of international relations based on the rule of law, trade, preaching by example, cooperation, and the Czech diplomacy, where paying by the dishes broken by others, and the Good Samaritan. And it has been very important to play this role. The only thing is that today is not enough, because when the European Union was born and developed, the world was completely different. And now there is a new relation of powers, and power has to be considered in a wide range of powers, not only the military one, not the only one that I will bomb you. You don't do what I want you to do. Power is being used through technology, by standard setting, for sure, by trade, by many, many other factors that were considered soft power until very recently. There is a weaponization. They become weapons. And the new duality, China-US, has increased the use of powers in order to fight. not fighting on the strict sense of the word, but trying to be very assertive. And Europe is not assertive. Europe is goodwill, cooperation, trade, help, example, and it works until a certain limit. I think that we have to learn to use other kind of approaches, and we also have to be more assertive. And the case of Libya is a good example. We have been saying there is no military solution, there is no military solution. And at the end, we are seeing a military solution because other actors, Turkey and Russia, don't dare to use power in the strict sense of the word. And the scenario has changed radically in less than 6 months. And now Turkey is the big player because he has been engaged militarily, sending not Turkish troops, but let's say proxies, and Russia doing the same thing. I am not preaching for the European Union to send an army to Libya because it's not in our radar screen, but I am saying that we have to use in a more assertive way the tools that we have, and we'll have some situation in which we'll have the opportunity to prove if we are really ready to do so or not, because soft power, it's not enough in our day work.
Let me stay on this issue for another while, another second, because clearly, and you anticipated that, Salameh's main target when talking of European stick was Libya. And you already mentioned that you are not asking for a military intervention, but let me ask you on Libya, how can the European Union win back a role? I wouldn't say a central role, but a role.
We are not as much as present as the Berlin process would have required. We gather all relevant actors in Berlin. Everybody agreed on doing something. Nobody has implemented their commitments. And we have been withdrawing, just remembering that at the Berlin you committed on doing so and so, and you haven't done it. We have launched the EDINI mission in order to try to control the arms embargo. I understand the criticism saying that we are only operating by the sea. But look, this is the mandate of the United Nations. The mandate of the United Nations about controlling the arms embargo clearly says by sea. There is no United Nations mandate for doing anything else. So if the United Nations wants to do something else, they will have to change their mandate. And it's better to do that than doing nothing. And I think we have to implement a stronger diplomatic engagement. I think that we have to go to reach out the actors and to push them. Look at that, oil. Libya is a rich country. They have plenty of oil. The oil wells are in the hand on one of the parts, and the other parts prevents this oil from being exported. The result is that there is no money for anyone, and the countries are starving. There is an opportunity for the European diplomatic capacity of reaching an agreement in order to exploit in a consensual matter the wealth of the country and to share the revenue among the different parts and reaching the population, because at the end, it's the Libyan people who are suffering that. If we are not able to build an agreement in order to deblock the oil exports, then, frankly speaking, who else can do it? No?
Let me briefly move to Syria, because in this virtual dialogue, we also had Ambassador Pedersen 2 weeks ago, who described the economic disaster the country is facing on top of everything. As you mentioned before, the coronavirus, it's an health issue, but it will also be an economic and social, and in Syria there is a war. At the 4th conference on the future of Syria, the European Union just confirmed its role as the major donor in the crisis. What kind of political solution is the European Union seeking? And do you believe power transition is still on the plate?
The Syrian bill for the Europeans, well, for the Syrians, it's gigantic. The Syrian bill for the Syrians is something overwhelming. The number of people that has been killed, displaced, exiled. It's a gigantic catastrophe. But the Europeans, we have been providing 20 billion euros, 20,000 million euros in the last 9 years. It's not a small amount of money. And we are helping 6.5 million people through protection activities. And we are very proud of doing that and gathering donors in order to raise additional money. Being us the most important donors, we need others to do so. And we have to continue doing that. But for how long? For how long can we continue gathering money and supporting financially the survival of 6 million people? The solution cannot be to keep them like the Palestinians as an eternal refugees that they will never go back home. But today, the conditions for these people going back are not met. The minimal conditions in terms of governance, public accountability, representativeness of the governing authorities in Libya are not met. We cannot put money under reconstruction on infrastructures, physical infrastructures, because rebuilding Syria is not just a matter of physically building. It's the social fabric that has to be rebuilt through trust and creating conditions that will prevent the recurrence of violence. And this requires conditions that are not met. And I understand that Lebanon and Jordan, the burden of the refugees is becoming very heavy. And they will be very happy if these people go back to their home, because they don't have the resilience and the capacity of taking care of so many people. And we have to really praise the capacity of these societies of taking care of so many refugees. Look at the Europeans, which would be our response if we had to accommodate 3.5 million people knocking at our door, not knocking at our door, going inside our territory. We have to learn a little bit of what is the size of the problems. So we have to continue helping them, to help Syria, to help Lebanon, to help Jordan, to help Turkey also. And I don't see by the time being the possibility of these people returning. We have to engage with the Syrian regime in order to create the conditions for these people coming back.
Beyond Syria, also Lebanon, you mentioned Lebanon for refugees, and Iraq are on the brink of economic collapse, and we will later talk of Iran. My question to you, is the European Union ready to cope with another wave of instability at its border? How?
We try to prevent this wave of instability. And to prevent is also a very, very demanding activity, because we have to put not only financial resources, but also political support. Lebanon, for example, I was talking with the Prime Minister of Lebanon a couple of days ago. For sure, they are on the edge. This country can fall in pieces due to the many reasons that you know better than I, but the situation has become worse from the economic point of view. And we have to step up and support Lebanon, not only in responding to the COVID emergency, we are doing that, but also packaging stronger support, financial support, and ask the international financial institutions to support Lebanon. We cannot afford that Lebanon fall into pieces, because then, yes, it will have a new wave of instability that will be much more expensive for us to support than trying to prevent it.
We will have more questions on Iran, Israel, and the MENA region from colleagues from think tanks very soon, in a few minutes. But let me close on one topic you mentioned at the very beginning. Europe versus the US and China dispute. which have been accelerated by the pandemic, which Europe somehow stuck in the middle, risking to be stuck in the middle. Let me make a reference to your Spanish and Catalan origin. You are a prominent Catalan who identifies himself as both Spanish and Catalan, and repeatedly acted as a moderating voice in a bitter dispute. Could this be a model for a European posture in the US-China dispute? Will it be possible for Europe to act as a moderating voice, or will Europe be under pressure to take side?
We are under pressure to take side every day, one way or another, and it's understandable. It's understandable that being not in the middle exactly, because being in the middle means that you are indifferent, and we share the same political system with the US. We are democracies, imperfect democracies, and we can debate which is the most imperfect one, the American democracy of our democracy. But in any case, we share the value of freedom, elections, free participation, freedom of competitivity among different ideas and different political alternatives. And this is very important. This is a crucial thing. We cannot be in the middle when you share the same political system. But on the other part, we have different interests, because in the real life, there are not only value, there are also value and interest. And we have to combine both. And I think that we have to have our own position. We have to look at the world with our own glasses, not through the glasses of the Americans, or for sure not the glasses of the Chinese. And yes, we can moderate, you know, and not exactly on the same way that the Catalan issue. I don't see the analogy between Catalonia and Spain and China and US. I don't see an analogy, but it's nothing to do, to tell the truth. But yes, we can moderate, but more than moderate, we can offer an alternative. Because one of the most important issues in the future is which is the development model that Africa will follow. I think that the big issue is not only which role will China play in the global order, but which development model will follow China. And it will depend on the perception of which political model is more efficient in order to fight poverty and to push development. And there comes the battle of narrative. During the COVID, we have been assisting to a development of I am the best one. I am the best, not only prepared, but I solved the problem at home, and now I am solving the problem. If you want, I will help you. I am the most efficient because my political system is more robust, and I am ready to give an immediate answer to a pandemic. And to tell the truth, the answer given by the US is not glorious, to tell the truth, and without being willing to be critical, but we have to recognize that it is the first global crisis in which the US is not leading. The US is not leading, it has retreated. And the consequence of the pandemic is not just 2 or 3 casualties as it was a big influenza. No? It's becoming very, very tough. And then we are in this battle of who is guilty. No? It's your fault. It was a Chinese virus. It was Wuhan white virus. And I don't think the moment is to blame each other. The moment is for cooperation. For sure, the World Health Organization has to be reviewed. But I don't think the most important pressing issue today is to start fighting about who is guilty and to abandon the World Health Organization and look for a confrontation when at the same time people continue dying, especially unhappily in US and in Latin America.
Thank you, Excellency. We have now 5 friends joining us, director of think tanks from the MENA region and beyond. And I'm glad to give the floor first to Maha Yaya, director of Carnegie Beirut. Maha, you have the floor for your question to Excellency Borrell.
Hello. Hi. Thank you. Thank you, Paolo. It's good to see you again, Your Excellency. I was going to ask you a question very simply about China and how the EU views the growing ties to China across the region, particularly since a number of deals have already been struck most recently. But since you mentioned Lebanon and we're based in Lebanon, I thought I would tag in a very small question, if you'll allow me, Paolo, on what kind of support do you think the EU would be able to provide the government of Lebanon at a time when the government itself is not doing what it needs to do to earn the confidence of its external partners and friends. So I'd be curious to see how you see perhaps, what role the EU can help in stabilizing Lebanon at this particular juncture in time, given the refugee crisis, etc. So 2 questions. Forgive me, Paolo.
Even High Representative.
We don't have miracle solutions in our toolbox. We can help. We are helping with financial assistance. On the last years, I think on the last 8 years, we have been investing almost more than 2.5 billion euros in Lebanon to address the basic needs of the refugees and also the population. That's not a small amount of money, 2.56 billion in the last 8 years. We have increased our help responding to the COVID emergency. And we are trying to influence the international financial institutions in order to finance Lebanon on this moment of a big economic crisis. But we don't have, as I said, a miracle capacity to solve the internal political problems of the country. This is something that has to be solved by the Lebanese themselves. Frankly speaking, I am not the problem solver, a universal problem solver. First, the Lebanon needs to agree to a program with IMF. This is something that has to be done by the Lebanese. I've been talking to the IMF, they are ready to agree on a program. It has to be agreed first by the Lebanese themselves. And no one can substitute them. We can influence them, but there is a fight even inside the Lebanese government, even about the figures that have to be presented to IMF in order to agree on a program. And when the IMF program will be agreed, then yes, then we can come and reinforce it, because our macro financial assistance is ready, but we cannot implement it because the previous agreement with IMF is a precondition, is a requirement. We cannot reimburse the financial assistance without the IMF agreement first. So I'm praising the Lebanese government to stop the internal battle and to present figures that IMF can consider accurate, and not fighting inside the government about which are the figures, because on this basis, IMF will never accept any kind of a program.
Thank you. William Weschler is the Director for Middle East Programs at the Atlantic Council, a friend and partner of MED. You have the floor, William, for your question.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, and thank you for the discussion so far. I found it, as always, extremely interesting and insightful. My question is about Iran. About Iran,
Iran.
And the
Iran.
yeah.
How do you pronounce Iran?
At the beginning of the year, of course, there was a great degree of escalation between the United States and Iran. Both in terms of the deaths of Americans in Iraq and, of course, the killing of Soleimani. There has more recently been a beginning of another wave of escalation with violence in Iraq, and, of course, things exploding inside of Iran in the nuclear program. And there are many of us who are very concerned still about the potential for an October surprise that might be linked to the U.S. electoral calendar. You have been very steadfast and eloquent on the need to return to the JCPOA. And I read a piece that you wrote today that you concluded in Project Syndicate, where you concluded that when the moment is right, we must be ready to build on the deal. When I talk to people in both Europe and Iran, when they ask the question of when the time might be ripe, they imagine after the next American election. And the question that I have for you is, can you help us manage expectations along those lines? Because, what do you anticipate if it is the case that Vice President Biden is elected and President Trump fails to win re-election? What will be Europe's expectations for a Biden administration in terms of the JCPOA? What will they see as successful in anticipation of a new administration, and what would they see as being disappointing?
Well, if they have to take into consideration the positions of the several important Democratic Party leaders about JCPOA, they have been very critical with the decision of this administration to leave this agreement. They are very critical with this decision. One could imagine that they will reconsider this decision. They have not been applauding Trump's decision, but expressing almost the same level of criticism that we have been doing. I don't know exactly on the same terms, but I've been listening to them saying that more or less the same arguments have been used. Look, without this deal, Iran could have gone nuclear right now. Right now, Iran would be a nuclear power, adding another factor of instability in a region which doesn't need more instability. So I am frankly convinced that we need to preserve this deal for two reasons. First, there is no other effective alternative around the corner. The idea that we can build another deal, and we call it Trump deal, no, it's not possible, you know. It took 12 years to break the difference and to cut a deal. The discussions were initiated in 2003, and the deal would have not been possible without the full buy of the US leadership at that time, without the US engagement, as well as Russia, China, and of course, Iran itself. But let also to put that this deal was a quid pro quo, was not just a nuclear deal by which Iran has to stop the nuclear developments. It was a quid pro quo. You do it, and then we open the door to trade, investment, and from the economic side, Iran will be considered a normal country. It was a big success for the European diplomacy. It was a big success for effective multilateralism. And it has been a success because the JCPOA has delivered on its promises. There is no other example of monitoring under the Atomic Energy Agency. There are 15 consecutive reports saying that Iran has met all their nuclear obligations until June 2019. So I don't think any administration, American administration, will be able to put on the table an alternative, a peaceful alternative to control the nuclear development of Iran. But we have also to fulfill our engagements. We cannot say Iran has to go back to full compliance if the economic side is not being at all fulfilled. And I hope that the hypothetical new administration will consider which are the alternatives.
This was the point which Minister Zarif strongly made last week when he was our guest, in a virtual dialogue. Thank you, High Representative. Joost Hilterman is Director for Middle East and North Africa Program at International Crisis Group. Joost, you have the floor.
Thank you, Paolo, and thank you, Mr. Borrell, for speaking to us today. I have a very simple question for you about the Israel-Palestine conflict. We have seen annexationist threats by Israel, and we've also seen the European Union and member states coming out with fairly strong responses to these threats, possibly to deter an actual Israeli move in the near future. But even if there is no direct annexation in the next few months, beyond that, the two-state solution as traditionally conceived is fading. How do you see European policy evolve given this reality of a fading two-state solution? How should Europe put itself forward on the Israel-Palestine conflict in order to bring it to some kind of just and lasting settlement?
Well, I've already said many times that annexation would not be a solution. And we are trying to use all our diplomatic engagement and capabilities in order to convince the Israeli government not to take this decision, because it would be counterproductive. Not only would violate international law, but it will be creating a lot of instability and will erode the fundamental post-war norms. The European Union will not be able to accept this kind of decisions, because if we accept annexation there, why not accept annexation in another place? I still hope that the annexation will not happen. And we are doing our best in order for this not happen. I don't want to anticipate anything. I don't want to start threatening to anyone. But I have to say clearly that it will affect the European Union relations with Israel. And I still hope that it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Karim El-Ainawi is the director of the Policy Center for the New South in Morocco. Karim, please.
Thank you, Paolo. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Excellency, for sharing your thoughts with us. I have a simple question. You just mentioned on your relation with Africa and some worries about the competition with China, and you mentioned the word narrative and the capacity to mobilize people and to bring them with you on board. There is a very important dynamic going on in Africa, which is regional integration, continental-wide integration, that is similar in a way, perpetuating the dream of the European Union, countries being able to give and take, to be reasonable, to get together. It's something that will shape the future of upcoming generations. What you think for the future of integration and your relation with Africa? What do you want it to be? What's the vision coming from Brussels, and what is the narrative actually that you are in a way, sort of sharing with us in Africa? And in what words, in what terms it is different than the one, China is in a way, offering and, speaking to Africa. Thank you very much.
A big question, but the battle of narrative is an expression that is more or less the same that using the language of power. No? It has created a certain school. But I am very much convinced that we are also in a battle of narrative, and also in Africa. When I said which development model will the African countries follow, it's depending on how they perceive the different capacities of the different models. And China is very good at this battle of narrative. They have a strong public diplomacy. They are investing a lot. They are much more open maybe on the procedures, much less cumbersome than the European Union procedures, with less requirements on the political side. And that's maybe why China is very much present everywhere in Africa. But we don't have to forget that the China intervention in Africa is not for free. It's not for free. It's also taking their part on the richness, the wealth of the African countries in terms of minerals, rare materials, oil, but it's maybe more assertive than our presence. And then we have a colonial power behind us that is also part of this narrative. China has never been a colonial power in Africa, and we have been. About the regional integration, look, when you see the map of Africa, and you see the number of kilometers of borders who are just lines following the meridians or parallels, then you realize how artificial is the political structure of the continent. This is also an heritage of the colonization. You don't see in Europe borders which are lines on the map. Borders are the scarps of the history on the earth, on the skin of the earth. And the borders in Africa are consequences of colonization. And it's a more important reason for integration, because these borders are a little bit more artificial than the ones that the history had been building in Europe. And regional integration would be much more profitable because the division is much more artificial. And we'll put together people and economic capacities. But I don't imagine an experience like the European one to be translated or transposed to Africa political landscape. The European experience is the result of a big war. Is the result of a continent that committed suicide, almost committed suicide, and then decided that this will never happen again. This is not the experience of Africa. And in other terms, Africa is too big to imagine that it can be a regional integration from the Mediterranean to the Cape. It has to be subcontinental integration procedures. And they are. And we believe that Africa needs regional integration on subsets of the African nations. And we are a strong partners of the African Union. We encourage regional integration, and we encourage the political development based on our political system, which, well, maybe is less assertive on bringing short-term results, but is much better from the point of view of the political development of a society. But in Africa, this battle of narrative will be developing in the coming years, more than in any other part of the world.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Corriere della Sera is one of the media partners of MED. We have the pleasure to have Francesca Basso with us. Francesca, you have the floor. You are muted. Okay. No, you are still muted, Francesca. Okay, now it's fine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. Excellency, coming back to the EU and China, EU is concerned about the evolution of China's role in the Mediterranean region. I mean, economy means also policy, and at the infrastructure level, China is having a big role in the area. I mean, in the harbor, for instance. So there is a concern about that. Also because it's a news of today, UK has decided to exclude Huawei from role in the new high-speed mobile network, mobile phone network. So there is a risk that's clear, or maybe it's not. How is the EU position about that? It's complex.
It's difficult to give an answer Can you be more concrete in the question?
So, as you mentioned at the beginning, there are value and there are interests. So China,
that's what the treaty, that's what the European treaty says.
No,
we have to defend our values and our interests.
So UK has decided to ban our way from the development of the new network. European Commission has and Union has an approach based on dialogue with China, and but we know that there is a problem at the level of playing same level playing field. So in Greece, China did a lot of investment. There are many countries in the Mediterranean area. Is EU concerned about the link between economy and political influence? Also in Portugal, there is a strong link. They, if I'm not wrong, they issued the first panda bond. I don't know if it's the right translation. So the soft power is also Chinese, not only European.
Yes. Well, in Portugal, I know that China's investment in Portugal has been a matter of concern. A couple of years ago, China was buying Electricité de Portugal.
Yeah.
It was a big issue in the Portuguese press. At that time, it was Minister for Foreign Affairs of Spain, and I share with my colleague Augusto how many trouble it created. Among other things, because one subsidiary of Electricidade de Portugal was an important US company. And the Americans said, if the Chinese buy Electricidade de Portugal, then you will have to sell your shares on this company because we are not going to be ready to accept that China is the owner of an energy company in the US. And yes, China has a lot of investment in Portugal and doesn't seem to be a problem, at least not for the current Portuguese government. And you say, are you concerned by the link between economics and policy? For sure, we are concerned. If my answer was not, you will be surprised, no? I said, no, I am not concerned. For sure, I am concerned. Quite a lot of concern, because economy, what does it mean, economy? 5G deployment is economy, isn't it? Yes, and it's a very part of the problem, because economy is not just buying t-shirts. Economies today means technology. And this is the real issue. The real issue is the technology development. Who is going to take the lead? And China is very much advanced in some fields. And I think that the battle about 5G is not just a matter about national security. It's also something related with the technological race. And there also, Europeans, we have to have our own approach. And this approach, by the way, diverges country from country. Not everybody's answering them the same way. And there is a big polemic in Germany about the 5G. And even inside the German government, there is a big divide about do they have to allow the Chinese to develop the 5G or not? Well, this is the issue of the political choices between the risk that represents for national security and technological development, because some European companies will have difficulties on not using the 5G technologies provided by Chinese companies. That's why the European Union has been delivering some guidance in order to try to make compatible these two sides of the coin. But once again, we Europeans, we have to have our own approach to this issue, which is critical for our future development, because our future will depend more than any other thing about our capacity to continue being the leaders, the technological leaders. Technology is everything. It's everything. The real basis of power has always been technology. And the Chinese know it very well. The Chinese know it very well, because since Mr. Watt invented the steam machine, they started their decadency. And if Mr. Watt had been Chinese instead of British, maybe this history would be completely different. And they don't want to repeat a history of domination by powers based on technological capacities.
Excellency, if you allow us, we still have 3 minutes. I would take a couple of questions from the chat. We have received a few. The first one is, this year is the 10th anniversary of the beginning of the Arab Spring, and only Tunisia has succeeded in building a democratic alternative to authoritarianism. How can the European Union help more Tunisia to consolidate its democracy?
Well, the Arab Spring was seen as a great moment of hope in the region. But after the spring, usually comes the autumn and the winter. And this moment of hope in the region has been vanishing in many countries. Happily, Tunisia is the only one maybe in which the Arab Spring has bring to not a hope, but a real change. What we are doing? Well, in the last 10 years, the European Union has more than doubled the financial assistance to Tunisia. It's not a small thing. More than double our financial assistance. Almost 2 billion in grants and 800 million in macroeconomic assistance. And this has been focusing on the implementation of the 2014 Constitution and the promotion of human rights, good governance, public administration, and the creation of a well-functioning, independent constitutional bodies. We have been providing support to the Tunisian civil society. I strongly believe that human development needs civil society. Without a civil society, you cannot have human development. You need a strong civil society. And Tunisia, more than other states in the region, has a civil society that deserves support. We have been supporting them. And we know that there are difficulties, but we have investing a lot of money and political support to Tunisia in order to keep macroeconomic stability, because without macroeconomic stability, you can do whatever you want. At the end, things doesn't work. Create a favorable business and investment climate to boost competitivity and employment. You know, for political stability is key. It was talking about technology, but apart from technology, there's another asset for a society, is political stability. And this requires institutions and a civil society. Both things are in a dialectical relation. Civil society asks for institutions help to develop civil society. And I think Tunisia is going to be able to face the challenges ahead. And we are there to support Tunisia, not only with financial support, but also with political commitment.
Your Excellency, it's 6 o'clock now. I'm afraid we have to leave you for all the other activities that you are managing. But at the very beginning, I said it was an honor and a pleasure to have you with us. I'm sure the pleasure was shared by all those who participated in this virtual dialogue. We are working on a hybrid MED conference in Rome at the beginning of December. On behalf of the entire MED community, a few representatives are here with us today. We really hope we will have the pleasure to have you in Rome at the beginning of December, if your activity will allow that. Gracias, muchas gracias. Good luck for your important role in representing Europe in the world.
Thank you. See you in Rome. Ci vediamo in Roma. ci vediamo in Roma, anche devo andare con una scafandra, come... not con una mascherina, ma con una scafandra.
Thank you
Grazie.
very much. Grazie mille. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody. Bye bye.